Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. Taking a giant to court, tea workers in Kenya file a case against Unilever, accusing the firm of failing to protect them from violence in 2007. A move towards peace, South Sudan orders the release of all prisoners of war and political detainees.
There is victory for us.
The strike continues in Nigeria with demands for minimum wage to be increased as yet unanswered by the government. Also on the program, like a prayer has come true. We meet the Madonna fan striking her own pose in Ghana.
I saw Madonna singing, I always fell in love with you. She's like, oh, I'm like, wow, I will sing like this woman.
And in sports, Nigeria's women are beaten by the USA in the quarterfinals of the Basketball World Cup in Spain. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Tea workers in Kenya have filed a case in the UK Supreme Court against consumer giant Unilever. The workers claim the firm failed to protect them during the violence that followed the 2007 elections. More than 1,000 people were killed and many more were injured when clashes between ethnic groups erupted 11 years ago. According to court documents, 7 Unilever workers lost their lives and 56 of their staff were raped after the poll. The employees believe the company failed to protect them as they argue the plantation attacks were foreseeable and that Unilever failed to respect its own human rights policy during the attacks. That's a claim the UK Dutch company denies. Well, Ferdinand Omondi has been following the story in Nairobi and he joins us now. Ferdinand, give us some background to this story.
Well, in 2007, the presidential results were very contentious. The then declared winner Mwai Kibaki was announced at night, and the opposition violently opposed the results. And what followed were weeks of violence in which at least 1,000 Kenyans were killed and well over 500,000 were displaced. In the aftermath, there have been various cases trying to bring justice to those who perpetrated it, the most famous being the one against the current President Uhuru Kenyatta, and his deputy William Ruto, which was taken to the International Criminal Court where they were charged with murder and rape, a case which has since been withdrawn. Now, the offshoots like these ones facing Unilever now is from workers who feel that companies did not do enough to protect them during that period when the violence occurred, in spite of reporting that they were at risk, as the case says.
And just how much support do they have from ordinary Kenyans there in the country? Because let's not forget that, yes, 7 people died who worked for Unilever, but hundreds others died from the general public.
It's a very complicated situation here in Kenya and a very touchy subject. As a matter of fact, the government has consistently been telling Kenyans to accept and move on. The basic narrative over any cases of violence here has been to try to let people forgive and forget. And for many people here, you'll still find some people claiming that they've been displaced. You'll still have some other people saying that they not receive enough compensation. And in the cases of these ones, they feel that enough justice hasn't been done. So we'll find pockets of people wanting historical injustice, including the 2007 elections, to be addressed for the country to move on peacefully. But there are others who feel that bringing back these cases will cause a lot of bad blood. In fact, you can understand that here in Kenya, the workers themselves feel that they cannot get justice because they feel there would be intimidation on their part.
Okay, Ferdinand Omondi, live there from Nairobi. Thank you very much. Well, with me in the studio is Rupert Skilbeck. He's the Executive Director of Redress. They've been working with families behind this case. Just before I speak to him, this is what Unilever have had to say on the matter. Unilever stands by the commitments made in our human rights policy statement, including to the UN guiding principles, and we strongly reject any allegation that we did not respect these in the case of tea workers affected by the nationwide breakdown of law and order that occurred in Kenya in 2007. So, Rupert, I mean, can Unilever really take any corporate responsibility for this, given that safety is essentially the responsibility of the government?
Well, as you were saying, the post-election violence was widespread. Hundreds of people were killed, there was large-scale rapes taking place and all sorts of violence against people as well. And there haven't been any successful prosecutions of anyone to find them responsible for what happened. And part of that took place on the Unilever tea estate as well. And so the victims of that particular incident are trying to seek responsibility against Unilever. And what they say is that their company, their subsidiary company, was there in Kenya, but the parent company here in London has some responsibility because they, for example, took responsibility for assessing the risk that was going on previous to the post-election violence.
Aren't we going down a very dangerous route where if they win this case, for instance, then you've got smaller companies, you know, SMEs in Kenya, which could be held responsible for the deaths of their workers during this period?
Well, the concern is if the policy of big companies goes down this way, where global companies can essentially say we're not responsible for what happens through our subsidiaries, even when there's a certain amount of control of those subsidiaries, then we end up with a situation where it's very easy for companies to essentially get rid of their human rights responsibilities. And what particularly has concerned the victims in this case and why they've written to Unilever is that they see the very strong policy that Unilever has, and they're respected for their human rights policies. And their CEO has particularly said how committed he is. He sees human rights not just as a responsibility but as an opportunity. And what the victims are saying is that Unilever are not taking the opportunity here to essentially meet with the people who work for Unilever and try and sort out this problem for them.
And another thing, is this case being heard in the UK and not in Kenya where these deaths took place, because the case could have been thrown up by a Kenyan court?
Well, the problem is it's almost impossible to get justice for post-election violence in Kenya. There are two cases that are currently in the High Court in Nairobi, one brought by a coalition of women's rights groups seeking justice for sexual violence, and one seeking violence for police shootings. And they have been sitting in those courts for 5 or 6 years, and they haven't even got to the first judgment yet. So it's a very slow process. And in this particular case, the UK court at the lower level decided that it was too dangerous for the claimants to bring their case in the Kenyan courts because there was such a risk of a violent attack in response to them bringing the case.
Is there any possibility at all of reaching an agreement with Unilever, for instance, between these aggrieved persons and the company?
Well, I think the victims who have written to the CEO of Unilever would be very pleased to meet with him and see if they can come to some conclusion. They say that they haven't been provided with support from Unilever. Unilever says that they have done. So there's a dispute there on the facts that needs to be resolved. That could be done through a courtroom or it could be done by negotiation.
OK, Rupert Skilberg, thank you very much for talking to us here on Focus on Africa.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. 5 people in Ethiopia have been charged with terrorism in connection with what prosecutors say was an attempt to assassinate the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed. 2 people were killed in a grenade attack in June at a rally in Addis Ababa. The US has called on Cameroon to hold to account soldiers who were revealed by the BBC Africa Eye program to be behind atrocities against civilians. A video showed the killing of 2 unarmed women with children. A popular fruit market in Rivers State in Nigeria went up in flames on Thursday night. The cause of the fire in Port Harcourt is still unknown. Traders claim the fire service did not turn up despite being called. People in the area were forced to pump water from their storage tanks to help put out the flames. Government activities in Nigeria have ground to a halt as the country enters the 2nd day of a nationwide strike by state employees seeking higher wages. Workers in several banks have also joined in the strike. These are pictures of the main government offices in the capital Abuja on day 1 of the strike. The workers say they want the minimum wage to be increased from about $60 a month to just over $200. The BBC's Mayeni Jones is in Lagos with the latest.
There is victory for us in the struggle for our members.
Well, turnout here hasn't quite been what union leaders would have wanted. But public buildings such as the one behind me are currently closed. What workers here are asking for is for a threefold increase on the minimum wage. They say what they're earning currently simply isn't enough with increases in the price of food and fuel.
when I have nothing to eat, I have to go to my labor, or I should go to the street and beg for money so that I will use to manage myself. It's easy for them. They should think about us. They should think about the people that are working between them. They think about us. They don't know what we are facing.
The strikes come as President Buhari is out of the country attending the UN General Assembly and will be seeking re-election next year. The country's only just come out of a recession, and there are fears that if this strike should continue indefinitely, it could have a detrimental effect on the country's economy. But the Ministry of Labour says it's confident that all issues will be resolved when talks resume on the 4th of October.
And let's just stay with Nigeria for a moment. We're getting reports a curfew has been imposed in Jos, the capital of Plateau State, in central Nigeria, following some violence which has claimed several lives. The skirmishes followed an attack by suspected cattle herders and a predominantly Christian community on the outskirts of the city on Thursday. Central Nigeria has seen frequent deadly conflict between herders and settler farmers recently. In South Sudan, President Salva Kiir has ordered the release of all prisoners of war and political detainees. It's part of a recent peace deal with the rebel leader Riek Machar. A number of Mr. Machar's fighters and supporters are in detention, along with activists and other critics of the government. It's hoped the agreement will end more than 5 years of civil war in South Sudan, which became independent in 2011. Let's get more now from Andrew Kwong. He's the advisor on political party affairs to the SPLM in opposition. That's the group headed by Dr. Riek Machar. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. So the order has been given. Have they been released?
Not yet. The decree was issued yesterday, the 27th of September. But today we haven't heard any release of political detainees.
And they haven't been released, but have you got any idea of who these people are? I mean, they are part of your party, your faction of the party. Do you know who they are?
We know them very well. They are prominent members of the movement. Some of them are key members. One of them is the spokesman of the chairman, Dr. Riek Machar, and he's called James Gadedak, and we have human rights lawyers like Dong Samuel, and as well as chairman of our relief, Idris. So we have got all the numbers of them, and they are all known to the movement.
Well, they haven't been released yet, but what's your reaction to this decree by President Salva Kiir that they should be released?
It is really positive toward the right direction, because we have been always asking President Kiir to release the political detainees as well as to lift the state of emergency, because we have signed an agreement, and to do that we have to actually start by building trust between both of us. And everybody is welcoming the peace being signed. There's no anything about it. We are happy to sign peace. We have always been for peace, and we want to sign peace, for our people need peace.
It's, I mean, you say you're happy for there to be peace, and you want to build trust. But even though the peace agreement has been signed, your leader, Dr. Riek Machar, is still in Khartoum and has refused to go to Juba.
It is premature to talk about going to Juba. I understand that President Kiir wants Dr. Riek to go to Juba for a celebration. This is too early. We haven't actually made any step one yet. The pre-interim means we have to set up committees. You know, we have to see the ceasefire is holding. Unfortunately, there are some areas the government is still pushing on. We understand why, and we are asking why the government is still fighting on the ground. When we sign peace, we know that this peace is not a good one, but with this peace is better than no peace at all.
Okay, Andrew Kwong from the SPLM in opposition. That's the Sudanese opposition party. Thank you very much for joining us here on Focus on Africa.
Thank you.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. All the sports still to come. In football, could Watford's Isaac Success be back to his best? I'm Peter Okwoche. The top stories this hour. Tea workers in Kenya have filed a case against consumer giant Unilever, accusing the firm of failing to protect them from post-election violence in 2007. And the president of South Sudan has ordered the release of all prisoners of war and political detainees. It's part of a peace deal signed recently. Today is World Rabies Day, and according to the World Health Organization, more than 20,000 people die each year in Africa from the disease. That's the second highest rate in the world after Asia. Rabies is often transmitted through dog bites. One of the countries working around the clock to eliminate the disease by the global target of 2030 is Kenya. The BBC's Ann Ngugi reports.
That's Sharon. It was two weeks before she passed on.
The late Sharon Chepchumba is the face of the anti-rabies campaign across Kenya. Her parents started running an awareness campaign dubbed Sharon Live On Foundation after losing their 8-year-old daughter more than 10 years ago. She was bitten by a rabid dog.
The dog jumped on her and bit her between around where the heart is.
Despite getting post-exposure treatment to prevent the virus from spreading to vital organs, Sharon did not survive. According to veterinary experts, rabies claims 2,000 lives every year here in Kenya. But that seems to be changing as the anti-rabies campaign gains momentum. Through Sharon's campaign and other initiatives led by local authorities, the level of rabies awareness across Kenya has gone up. It is not unusual to see dog vaccination drives such as this one in Nandi in the North Rift of Kenya. This is where Sharon was bitten by a dog, and this initiative began soon after her death.
If you vaccinate a dog, it costs just about $1 to vaccinate a dog. But if you are exposed to rabies through a bite, to get the vaccinations, you need at least 5 doses, and that will cost you $100 for the full cost.
Efforts to rid Kenya of rabies have spread to many other places, not just Sharon's home county. At this local dog market in Western Kenya, owners, buyers and sellers come here with their dogs to get them shots.
I had my neighbor who was bited by the dog, and he delayed to be treated, and then lastly he passed away. If you buy a dog, at least he's supposed to be vaccinated by the anti-rabies.
That disease is very dangerous. It is not a good disease, and we normally get that disease from the dog. So we make sure if you buy the dog, you treat the dog.
Through anti-rabies vaccination and awareness campaigns like Sharon Live On Foundation, Kenya hopes to eliminate rabies by 2030, in line with the global goal set by World Health Organization. Ann Ngugi, BBC News.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi, what have we got?
Oh, we got basketball. Lots of basketball.
We lost.
Unfortunately, yes. So basketball there, where Nigeria's historic run at the Women's World Cup came to an end in Spain today. They were beaten in the quarterfinals by the defending champions, the USA, 71-40. They've had a great run at the competition, being the first African country to reach the last 8. They will now be fighting for places outside the top 4. And as we reported yesterday, WADA warned Kenya, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and Investigations Department has described doping cases in the country as serious. But they did declare that there was no evidence of institutionalized doping. It's in the wake of a 2-year investigation following a number of positive tests, which involved high-profile Kenyan athletes. The findings said it was more out of opportunism and lack of education rather than any conspiracy.
But even as we do that also, as ADAC, we have heightened our outreach programs, our education programs, to the point at which almost every week now we would have an education program going on somewhere at some place in this republic. Which means as we do the deterrence, we are also doing the sharing of information, making sure that the athletes know what it is, making sure that the general public also are sensitized to know about the dangers of doping.
Watford manager Javi Gracia says Nigerian striker Isaac's success looks to be on his way back to his best form. Success arrived at Watford in 2016. At the same time, he was a record signing for the club and much was expected of the 22-year-old. But a spate of injuries and off-field controversies halted his progress. Now, the manager's been speaking ahead of that game against Arsenal tomorrow that the real success is back.
Yeah, Isaac's success now is not the same Isaac's success I knew when I arrived. It's other player, because when I arrived, he started to train after being injured, and now he went on loan to Malaga, and now he started this precision training really well. He started with the rest of the players, and I think now he's fit.
And that's all the sport. Back to you, Peter.
I mean, you would expect him to be successful, wouldn't you?
Yes, indeed. Good one there,
Sorry.
Peter.
Now let's meet Ghana Afro-pop singer-songwriter Wiata. She's from very humble beginnings and she's risen to the crest of Ghana's musical scene. Her hit single, Rock My Body, won her 2 awards at the first edition of the All African Music Awards in 2014. And as she tells the BBC's Ben Hunt from BBC Africa's children's show What's New, her life changed after seeing Madonna on TV one day.
I wanna feel the heat.
From growing up in a place with no electricity to touring the world.
I am the lioness of Africa. Whenever I go out, I rah.
This is one girl who doesn't let her beginnings shape her future.
Growing up in my village, we didn't have electricity. No lights. Nope. No. In 2012, we got electricity. But when I was small, I used to watch TV for 3 hours, 30 minutes. So they had this huge generator. They just started and you all run into the house, 6:30 to 9:30. So I'll be watching and I saw Madonna singing. I always fell in love with you. She's like, oh, I'm like, wow. I will sing like this woman.
From that moment, Wiala made the most of every single opportunity to perform.
When I got the chance to go to secondary school, that was my chance. Because every Saturday we had entertainment night, and I never missed my opportunity. And I will gather the children and tell them, look, you be the audience, I'm Madonna.
Now she uses her platform to try and change the world.
Now I'm popular, everybody listen to you. So I have to use the voice wisely, like end child marriage. I have friends who were taken out from school when we were growing up. And you go back, you see them, they all have babies, they are at the market, sitting on the floor, looking all, it's not cool. Now they've named me after a street in that town, Wiala Street. That was when I realized. Wiala Street. That is when I realized that, wow, I have made an impact. Sometimes, I don't know whether it's luck, faith, belief, and taking my chances and taking my opportunities. When I see one, I'm just happy.
Good for her. Before we go, another look at our top story. Tea workers in Kenya have filed a case in the UK Supreme Court against consumer giant Unilever. The workers claim the firm failed to protect them during the violence that followed the 2007 elections. Unilever, of course, deny those claims. That's it on Focus on Africa for today. Have a great weekend. I'm Peter Okwoche. See you soon.